blessing, thanks God for her life, despite our being saddened by her death. So if just the three of you and Elaine would recite after me, Baruch, Atah, Adonai, Eloheinu, Melech, Ha'olam, Dayan, Ha'emet. And now in English, blessed art thou, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, creator of life, and true judge. And we all say together, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our services, if we can please kindly turn off all cell phones or electronic devices, or please place them on silent. Thank you.
Friends, with this affirmation, Baruch Dayan Ha'emet, blessed be the judge of truth on our lips, and with sadness in our hearts, we come together this morning to remember Barbara with love and to share with her family our profound sadness at her passing and to bring them support, comfort, and love. We're going to begin the service with a selection from the book of Psalms. Psalm 121 is a prayer in which we ask God to guard our souls in our going out and in our coming in. And we recite it today as a prayer that God will guard Barbara's soul now that she has gone out of our presence and come in to God's eternal and everlasting presence. I'm going to chant a few of the original verses in Hebrew, and then I'll read a version of the psalm in English. Shir Lamalot Esahinai Eleharim Me'ayin Yavo Ezri Ezri Mehim Adonai Oseh Shamayim V'aretz Al Yitein Lamot Raglecha Al Yanum Shomrecha Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael. I will lift my eyes up to the mountains. Where will my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, creator of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot slip. Your guardian never slumbers. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. The Lord will be your protector. The Lord will give you shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you during the day, nor the moon at night. The Lord will keep you from all evil and preserve your soul. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forever. The 23rd Psalm expresses our conviction that even when we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we are never alone, that God is always with us and gives us support, strength, and courage equal to our needs. If you have one of the white pamphlets, the 23rd Psalm is on page 3. If you are familiar with the words of the 23rd Psalm, I invite you to join me in reciting it. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest the table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. At the end of the book of Proverbs in the Bible, there is a passage of praise for a good woman, and part of it says, her children are first to call her blessed, saying, many women have been valorous, but thou excellest them all. And in that spirit, it is grandchildren and one of Barbara's children who are going to share with us their special memories of love and admiration this morning. So first, Molly, her granddaughter, and then her granddaughter Haley are going to speak, and then after that, her daughter Rochelle. So Molly, if you'll come up and get things rolling.
Thanks everybody for coming, first of all. 97 and a half years. 97 and a half years of an incredible life. But I would say her most fulfilling years were the last 31 as a grandmother. Most of you knew her as Barbara, or Aunt Barbara, but to her 4 grandchildren, she was our grandma. She was Yoda. Why Yoda? Well, because the character Yoda is essentially a genius. And if you ask my grandmother herself, she was also a genius. A short, wrinkly woman full of useless and useful knowledge, and that is how we got Yoda. She accepted it, and that was the name that she would go by. There were a few times I would call her grandma, and she would either look at me and tell me over the phone, that's not my name. All of her birthday cakes would say Yoda, and she even stitched the name Yoda into the lining of her fur coat. She was our Yoda. The woman who loved her Bombay Sapphire every night, her Phillies, the color red, she could tell, and being the matriarch of her family, and her grandchildren more than anything in this world. 31 years ago, in 1991, she became a grandmother for the first time when my brother Jacob was born. A grandmother, but not a bubby, as Jewish grandmothers are normally called. She was not a fan of the word. To her, it meant old, and absolutely no one was going to tell her she was old. In June of 92, I came along, followed by the twins, Jeremy and Haley, in February of 96. For the first 9 or 10 years of my life, Yoda was still living at her home in 1 Allendale, on 1 Allendale Road in Lower Merion, also known as the party house with the big yard. The house as kids we thought was far away was only 45 minutes with traffic. This house was truly the best. As the matriarch, she hosted all of our family occasions, birthday parties, Hanukkah parties, Passover seders, and parties just to throw parties. Now you probably understand why my family throws parties for everything. It is in our genes. While these parties brought some of our family's best memories, it was our weekly dinners in the smaller back dining room that I will cherish. My dad got home from work late during the week, so on either a Tuesday or a Wednesday night, my mom, my brother, and I would head to Lower Merion for dinner with Yoda. Not just any dinner, a full multi-course meal prepped by her all day long. The menu always decided the day or two before, directly after her morning coffee, because that was her thing, asking people what they wanted for dinner right after breakfast. And the best part about those weekly dinners is she would absolutely never force you to eat vegetables. She did not eat them herself, unless it was creamed spinach, so she would not force those vegetables on us. As often as we would go to Lower Merion, she was also traveling to Cherry Hill just as much. When we were 9 or 10, she made the move to Cherry Hill. She would be within minutes from her sister Elaine and just a few miles away from us. The move made sense. Her friends and her family were here, so it was right for the life of the party to make her way to Cherry Hill. When you're a young kid, you don't understand just how lucky you are that your grandmother would be living just a few miles away from you the next 20 years. As you grow up, you understand. Not just for the big moments in life she was always around for, but the smaller daily moments we had, simple moments when you were little, like my brother and I either getting driven or picked up from school. In my case, she would always be on hand as an extra ride to and from the rink. As my brother and I got older and had cars of our own, we would drive over to Yoda's just to see her, to catch up, to show her something, or just to talk when you needed some advice. She was always there, except in the summer, where you could find her on Melbourne Avenue in Ventnor, as she would call it, the seashore. From June through Labor Day, and even if longer if the weather was nice, Yoda lived at the house in Ventnor. In many years when we were younger, we would also move down the shore with her for the full summer. Not only did my grandma live just a few miles by us year-round, now we got to live with her every day in our favorite place. As we got older, we would come down each weekend. And as she got older, she also transitioned into that weekend warrior. But our summers were built around the beach. You could always count on Yoda to look at you after dinner and hand you money for ice cream, as long as you promised to bring back some vanilla soft serve with peanut butter. And I can definitely tell you, we exceeded in the task many, many times for many summers in a row. She taught us how to swim with the big waves, where she would hold me and we'd ride the waves for hours. Then there were the memories of staying up late to get her, waiting for her to get home from uptown, as she called Atlantic City, just to see if she managed to come away with some win from the 3-card poker table. Anything, $5 was a win for her. The shore was her spot. It was our family spot. She would sit in her wooden chair in the living room or on the porch and have a happy hour and entertain everyone with her stories, wit, and humor. And it's her wit and humor that brings smiles to our faces when we talk about the stories she has told and her legendary one-liners. If she's watching the Phillies, as she did almost every night, she would yell at them to hit the ball. Listen to me. Hit the ball. And then when they finally listened and started to score lots of runs, she would yell at them to save some runs for the next game. And she also saved her one-liners for her grandkids, with the absolute most famous of all, apologize for the language, if I wasn't your grandmother, I'd tell you to go fuck yourself. And if she said those coveted words to you, you did something right. Yoda taught us the importance of family values, traditions, and love. And of course she loved her family, as we are as close as we are now because of her. But she loved her animals, especially her dogs. She fell in love with Alaskan Malamutes and had 4 throughout her adult life: Saji, Misha, Juno, and Max. Her last baby, Max, was her love. Her first male Malamute, and he was different. His personality was a sweetheart, and Yoda was his favorite person in the world. Although she was older when Max passed, I promised her I would continue the Malamute tradition, which is exactly what I did with my husband, Michael. Every time she would see our Malamute Decker, she would light up and comment on how much he reminded her of Max. It made her so happy to have another Malamute around. On the few occasions she would leave the animals as she got older, it was to travel. And as she got older, we convinced her one year to come on our family trip to Aruba. Aruba turned into our spot, and Yoda would come each year. Everything she loved in life was right there for her. Her family, good cocktails, a suntan, and a casino, all on the same hotel property. What more could she have wanted? Our nightly routine was to drop Yoda off at the casino right after dinner, and if she was not back in 2 hours or so, we would go check on her and pull her stubborn self off that 3-card table. But if I had one memory from all of our trips to Aruba, it was the year we put her on a luggage cart to transport her from the elevator to our room. The hallway was long, and when we got off the elevator, probably a few drinks in, we noticed the luggage cart and made a joke that Yoda should hop on. Sure enough, a few seconds later, she was standing there on her chariot, the luggage cart, being wheeled to her room by her grandson. This is who she was. No matter how old she got, her humor never left her. And I'd like to think I got my humor and my wit from my grandmother. As I get older, I see a lot of her in me, and there are moments where I find myself actually saying, wow, I am Yoda's granddaughter. Or when I try saying something softly, my husband Michael will whisper to me, Jewish whisper, which is what we would say when Yoda was trying to talk softly about someone or something, but would end up talking loud enough for everyone to hear. We will miss that Jewish whisper. Before I close, I wanted to share what it is like specifically to be a granddaughter of Barbara Waitz. She loved all of her grandchildren, but sorry, Jacob and Jeremy. There was something about a Jewish grandmother's relationship with her granddaughter that is special in its own way, and Haley and I were lucky enough to have that. Each year on our birthday, Haley and I were given a pearl to create the necklaces that we have on today. She made my first skating dress, bought me my first fur coat when I told her I was a big girl at 5 years old, helped pick out my bat mitzvah gown, and the best gift of all, she got to see me in my wedding dress, a picture that I will have forever. These were the important things to her. I will miss everything about my grandmother, but if I had to pick one thing I'm going to miss the most, it is her love. She loved so hard. She loved her children, her grandchildren, all of her nieces and nephews, and of course her dear friends and grandson-in-law. When we left for dinner just last week, she told me she loved me. I know she did. She spent 97 and a half years, and I spent almost 30 years loving her. I'm the luckiest woman in the world to have Barbara Waitz as my grandmother, as we all are. We love you, Yoda.
Good morning, everyone. Exactly 4 years ago yesterday, I wrote this speech for a speech writing class that I took my senior year of college. The assignment was to write a how-to speech. We were supposed to stand in front of our class for about 20 students, and teach them how to do something through words alone. Some of my peers taught the class how to write simple computer code, others spoke about the perfect way to pitch a baseball. I spoke about my grandma. My speech was disguised as a how-to guide for making Grandma Barbara's famous gefilte fish. But really, it was a speech paying homage to the incredible woman that my grandmother was, with a focus on her extraordinary culinary skills. I may not have truly followed the assignment, but I still got an A. What follows is an abridged version of the speech I wrote 4 years ago. I thought I would spare you the nitty-gritty details of the famous Barbara Waitz method of gefilte fish making. If you want the full version of this recipe, you will have to ask my mother and my aunt, the next best gefilte fish makers, second to my grandma. All right, here it goes. Grandma Barbara, the old wise Yoda, as my cousins call her. She was one of my favorite people on this planet, and her recipes are some of my favorite as well. I feel like everyone thinks his or her grandmother's cooking is the best thing in the world. I guess I fall into this category as well, except for the only difference is my grandmother's cooking is actually the best. My grandmother's birthday cakes, so much better than your grandmother's. My grandmother approached her culinary endeavors a little differently than most, and to fully understand her cooking approach, you will need to have an understanding of her. So to begin, I'd like to describe Barbara Waitz, a 97-and-a-half-year-old Jewish woman who lived with her golden retriever named Pippin in a rancher in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, an ex-Navy nurse, an ex-wife, a lover of gin, specifically a Gibson on the rocks, very dry, an admirer of theater and opera, a hater of fruit, water, and exercise, the most stubborn, judgmental, yet accepting woman you'll have ever met, and a believer that life is to be taken by the reins and lived to its fullest, a believer of following your dreams no matter what they are, taking any and every opportunity you are given, and a believer of fun, excitement, partying, indulgences, and happiness. And if you could somehow use those qualities as ingredients, you would be cooking like Barbara Waitz. You can taste her personality in her recipes, hear her infectious laughter in the sizzle of her food, and see her massive, affectionate smile in the finished meal. To say I admired her and wished to become half the woman she was one day is an understatement. Sorry. I guess I'll start by emulating her cooking. Following one of Barbara Waitz's recipes is no simple task. It requires translating, deciphering, interpreting, flexibility, judgment calls, and in the end, luck. And as her father used to say, better to be lucky. She used her own language, her own idea of measurements, and her own interpretation of ingredients. It's not as simple as adding a cup of sugar and a teaspoon of salt. To understand the basics of a Barbara Waitz recipe, you need to understand her language. And I apologize in advance because she did not have the cleanest language. I would like to define a couple of the most important terms she used when writing down a recipe. First, a gullup. You know that sound a bottle of liquid makes when you pour it just a little too fast? That's a gullup. And next, a shitload. This one is a little harder to define, and to me I found it to be quite a personal quantity. I'd say just use your best judgment. Additionally, if she called for an exact measurement like a teaspoon or a cup, she usually meant a heavy teaspoon or cup. Measuring for her was an art form, not a science. She never took half measures, literally and figuratively, in cooking and in life. Every Passover, my grandmother would make gefilte fish from scratch, like grind up your own fish scratch. Fish that would soon end up on every surface of her kitchen scratch. But if it didn't, would her gefilte fish really taste the same? I don't think so. Yeah. Because my family values tradition, I had to learn how to make it so that I could pass it down to my own children in the future. Now I do like gefilte fish, served with a little horseradish. It's actually quite good. The process of making these palm-sized fish meatballs, however, is the most disgusting thing I'll ever be tasked to do. There's a reason why no one makes it from scratch anymore, when you can find a jar in almost every grocery store. Yet if my grandmother asked me today to help her form the Passover fish balls, as she would call them, I would roll up my sleeves and get right to work. My grandmother expressed her love in many ways. Her food was the most delicious expression of her love, and cooking with her was my favorite thing to do. I'm grateful that my family values tradition. My grandmother had been training my aunt and my mother to cook her classic recipes for years and years. They are now the best cooks I know. Even the classic eaters of our family have become Barbara Waitz recipe makers. My Uncle Aaron, the most talented eater I know, has mastered her famous mushroom omelet. In the Jewish faith, your past loved ones live on through the memories of who they leave behind. I know we are all overflowing with joyous memories of Grandma Barbara. She made that very, very easy for us. But I think not only will she continue to live through our memories, but also our bellies. Some days we will miss our matriarch more than others, and on those days, I know that putting a big pot of her chicken soup up to cook or baking her famous banana nut cake will help her feel just a little bit closer. Mom, Aunt Rochelle, Molly, we have a very important job. We are now the Barbara Waitz gefilte fish makers. We need to cook with excitement, love, sass, a little bit of gin, and most importantly, a very heavy hand. And we will still continue to relive our cherished memories of Yoda, but we will also pass her memory along with each making of her delicious recipes. Not only do I want my children to hear about how badass of a great-grandmother they had, but I want them to taste the food she made. I want them to hear her laugh in the sizzle of their fried matzah, see her smile in their mushroom omelets, and feel her embrace with every serve of their matzo ball soup.
Oh, my speech is highly repetitive. Could have cut through half of that, save some time. Okay. I had an extended period of time to prepare this eulogy. After all, when your mom lives to be 97 plus years, you have to recognize that this day is coming sooner than later. Naturally, you want it to be later, but nature and God have other plans. Knowing this day was approaching, I kind of prepared a little bit in advance, but then my niece and my daughter outshone me. I spent a lot of time following my father's death, contemplating how I would address this speech. Following my father's funeral, my mother told me how his obituary in the newspaper sucked, and how I failed to mention numerous factors in his eulogy. I felt rushed preparing that speech. She wanted to make sure that I did a better job at hers. When I asked her if she wanted to write her own speech, I mean, after all, she was a journalism major at NYU, she told me to practice the art of self. You can fill in that blank. Her firm directive to me was I was not to mention my father's name in any manner, so current reference should be deleted. I can skip the next paragraph on Yoda. I think it's been explained to everybody. Let's start off by saying that Barbara lived grand. She was never content to be another parent in the PTA. She had to be the president of the PTA. She wasn't satisfied to be just another Girl Scout leader. She had to be the neighborhood chairman and oversee 15 Girl Scout troops. She was not the cookie chairman. She had to be the cookie distributor. And every year we'd have an 18-wheeler pull up to one avenue and unload pallets of Girl Scout cookies into the living room. And to this day, I cannot stand the scent of Girl Scout cookies. Brand also extended to the way she entertained, as the two have already stated. Holidays were cause for celebration and utter exhaustion. She tried to design the menu to fit everyone's personal tastes. This meant on Thanksgiving, we had the standard turkey, but she also had to have a brisket because her father hated turkey. We also had to have 2 types of sweet potatoes because Uncle Sam did not like the standard candied version, so we had to have that whipped thing with the marshmallows burnt on top, and they were always burnt, trust me. Then we needed the white potatoes because Uncle Sam her father didn't like any type of yam. So, and then there were the vegetables. You can get the picture. It became a lot easier when she started going to New York for Thanksgiving. Grand extended to Passover. And thank God we didn't have turkey. Gallons of matzo ball soup, mounds of chopped liver, and of course, the aforementioned gefilte fish. We would sit down at the table and rest for a few minutes, only to hear my grandfather announce to my Uncle Sam, who was leading a Seder, that we could skip that prayer, we did it last year. Once she started feeding her father in the kitchen prior to starting the Seder, it would be abbreviated, but then Joanne married Martin, the Seder got long again. She fretted about the brisket drying out. Gran could also describe her yearly parties, usually in February. It was my father's birthday and their anniversary. My mother and Margot and I would cook for weeks, freezing food and for the anointed night, and that only in containers, in the freezer that only Arnold Schwarzenegger could open. The only problem with being grand is Mom entertained without lists. So each year, the day after the party, we'd go down the basement and we would find one item that was never served. One year it was tortoni, the next year it was cheese balls, one year it was rumaki. And she could make a party and utterly destroy the kitchen, which I understand my niece has inherited that. Finally, Grand was the proper description on how she managed the shore house or any rental property that we had in Ventnor prior to them purchasing it. No invitation required, just show up. Pancakes for breakfast for an army, so long as you only cooked 3 in a pan. Dinner could always be extended to a few dozen more. She was always happy when surrounded by her family, extended and beyond. And of course, everyone always came with the obligatory bottle of gin. Bombay Sapphire took over after Tanqueray, which made her even happier. And then there was Barbara's way. Mom was a royal pain when it came to doing things in a certain manner. As I already mentioned, the dinner table had to be set just so. Plates an inch from the bottom of the table, silverware, pillowcases needed to be ironed. I was even trained to iron undershirts. Ask Jacob. He grew up starched. I learned the major lessons in life from my mother. Mrs. Dreby taught me how to measure shortening in a glass of water. My mother taught me how to command a kitchen. Professors taught me the law. My mother instilled in me the demand to achieve. My religious teachers taught me tzedakah. My mother taught me the meaning of charity. Mom created the physician, and not so hot attorney, but she demanded of others just as she demanded of herself. Sometimes that would make life rather hectic in my youth. Everyone who remembers my mother can rest assured that she loved you, which doesn't obviate the intense criticisms, which cut right to your bone marrow. We were either too thin, too fat, or our hair was not like she liked it, or we didn't dress the way she preferred. As her hearing failed, her criticisms would be announced in dulcet tones for all to inappropriately hear, while Margot and I would be cringing behind her. Even though she was often critical of her grandchildren, she lived for and through them and cherished them. Sometimes I believe my purpose in life was to give her my children to adore. Jacob, as her first grandchild, was utter perfection in her eyes, although she hated her abundance of hair. In Molly, my mother saw her mother Rose, demanding of herself and others, talented and gorgeous. She absolutely beamed when she heard Haley got engaged last week. And not to forget Jeremy, she was ever so proud of you and your accomplishments, but could not understand what you do. But neither do I. Please don't allow your memories to fade. I'm thankful the photos we have of her, of Molly, and especially the one with Molly in her gown, although you guys can't see that one yet. You ought to know that Mom was a Reagan Republican. At least that part is passing on. And the most interesting thing was on Friday when we were meeting here, my mother is going into a side-by-side crib. And they asked Molly and I which side. Always to the right. And another thing, I want everyone here to recognize that it is my brother's birthday today. Shake his hand, pat him on the back, let him remember that today, what the day is to him and not this day for her. And I leave you with a message of hope and love. I hope you remember Barbara with the grace that she impacted your life and in some small manner moved you to where you stand today. She created 3 successful children, no small feat when you look back in the era when Margaret and I started graduate school. She demanded from us the same level she demanded of herself, and I believe she left us all in a better place for having her in our lives. Thank you very much.
Those were really amazing tributes to a grand and incredible life. And I know that they only began to reflect some of the incredible strength and charisma in Barbara's life. But each in their own way, Molly, Haley, and Rochelle, each of you just spoke about her spirit with such love and admiration. The way she impacted you, the way she impacted the family and the world, and the great resolve and determination and energy with which she lived her life. And these were really wonderful tributes. And I can't imagine that she would find fault with any of them, but from what I have heard, she probably would find something to say. We want to extend our deep condolences to Aaron, to Rochelle, and Margot on the loss of your mother. And Aaron, I understand today's your birthday, is what I heard, and that's what motherhood and childhood is all about, when the mother brings a child into the world. And I know your sisters told me the other day that you were an incredibly devoted son to your mother, that during COVID you came and lived with her, and that throughout these last years of her life you came in on weekends, took her to the hairdresser, took her to lunch, and were a constant presence in her life, and I know that they appreciate your devotion to her. It's really amazing to see a woman who has children who love her, and who has grandchildren who love her as their Yoda, as their source of both useful and useless knowledge, and who can always be depended upon to have just the right insight. So we want to extend our sympathy to Jacob, to Molly and her husband Michael, to Jeremy and Haley and her fiancé Kurt. And as you know, Haley and Kurt, this one of the last things that Barbara got to hear over FaceTime was about their engagement and to see the wedding ring, the engagement ring, and that really made her so happy during these last moments of her life. And she was looking forward to the Jewish ceremony for Molly and Michael that's going to be coming up in June. And though she won't be there in person, you will be standing under a chuppah that was needle-pointed by Barbara, by her sister Elaine, who was here with us today, and by her niece Joanne. So it's really wonderful to have those kinds of family traditions, tangible things about family that link us together and that create these kinds of memories that far outlast even our own lives. We want to acknowledge the love that she had for Richard and Gordon. Even though she didn't give birth to you guys, you looked at her with a motherly impact. You felt her mothering to you, just as many people felt that she was a maternal influence on their lives. At 97, she had an incredibly long life, even by today's standards of extended longevity. But when you get to be 97, life does indeed get more and more difficult as it begins to wind down. She wanted to remain in her home. She wanted to maintain the kind of independence and sense of self that she had all of her life. And it was a blessing that you were able to make it possible for her to live out every last second of her life in her own home. I know how grateful the family is to her aide Esther, who has been with her for these years. Even though initially she resisted having help at home, eventually she came to be very appreciative of you, and I know how grateful the family is for the love and devotion and constancy that you gave to Barbara throughout these last years of your companionship and loyalty to her. When she passed away, literally she just got into her bed and stopped breathing. It could not have been more peaceful for her to slip away, more fitting for the kind of energetic life that she lived. There was no suffering, there was no hospitalization, there was no torture, either for her or for her family. The rabbis say that when someone passes away this way, it is as if they die b'nishikah, with a kiss of God, as if God kisses them on the lips and gently extracts the soul. When we look back upon Barbara's more than 97 years of life, we know that it was indeed an incredible life, a grand life, a colorful life, an amazing life. Not only in its length, but because of its passion, its drive, and its creativity. It was a life of high energy. It was a life marked by love of family, that children and grandchildren who sustained her will continue to treasure the memory of her example. In less than 2 weeks, we will be observing the Passover holiday. Passover always is a time when we sit around the table, and it's not just about the Haggadah, it's not just about the Seder, it's about the people we sit around the table with, the memories of each of the people who are there and the ones who are no longer with us. Just as the gefilte fish that she made from scratch will always be a part of the Passover lore of your family, so too she will always be remembered when you gather around your Passover tables. Her place at the table will be empty, but your hearts will be full of memories and love, and that will be an everlasting blessing. So as we say our farewell to Barbara today, we know it's a farewell of her physical form, but we know that the memories will continue to live on. The love that bound you to her will continue to keep you strong together, and that the example of her life, its strength, its determination, its resilience, its just thrill at being alive and being proud of who she was, those things will always be part of your own memories and of the bond of love that will link you to each other and to her forever. Tehi nishmatat tzurah b'tzuror hachayim. May her soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life, and let us say, Amen. Friends, if you are comfortable standing, please rise for the memorial prayers, the El Malei Rachamim, first in Hebrew and then in English. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamaromim, Hamatzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, B'ma'alot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kezohar Harakia, Mazirim et Nishmat Sarabel Bat Yosef Rachel Shalacha Le'olama B'Gan Eden Tehei Menuchata Anna Ba'al HaRachamim Hastireha B'Seter Knafecha Le'olamim Utzeror b'tzror chayim et nishmata, Adonai hu nachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar Amen. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure who shine as the brightness of the firmament, under the soul of Barbara Waitz, who has gone to her eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the goodness and love that she brought to the land of the living. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. The Lord is her portion. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Friends, please be seated. Following the service here in the chapel, the entombment is going to be at Chaim Solomon Memorial Park in Fraser, Pennsylvania. The family has requested that if you would like to make a memorial contribution in Barbara's memory, that you consider the Wounded Warrior Project or any good charity of your choice.
Will the pallbearers please step to the center aisle? we can rise once more, please.
Yes, we can all place our inside hand on top of the casket and walk alongside.
אשת חיל מימצא, ורחוק מפני מכרע. עמו בניה וישרוה, רבות עשו חיל, רבות עשו חיל, ויעטלת על כולנה.
You may be seated. Unless we can kindly remain seated, please, just for a moment.
Walk alongside and walk to the rear end of the house.
Folks in this room, we'll get into our cars, please.